Hello and welcome to another book synopsis with Unjustified. My name is Kim and I will be your host. To clarify a few things before we get started, I do not read the books word for word. I do change the words to my own. However, if it is direct quotes or direct legal wording and verbiage, those things I will not change. Even after you finish listening to my synopsis of this book, I highly recommend and encourage you to go purchase the book itself. In no way is my synopsis going to ever hold justice to the actual author's words. I will always leave a link in the description box below where you can purchase the book. Also, my book synopsises are not documentaries. They are not videos nor photos. These are basically like a podcast or an audible. So without further ado, let's get into this book. Released. Conversations on the Eve of Freedom. Written by Gypsy Rose Blanchard with Melissa Moore and Michelle Matrasani. This ebook was released on January the 9th, 2024. I had pre-ordered it through Apple Books at a cost of $9.99. The link to purchase this book is provided in the description box below. Preface. The life of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and the murder of her 48-year-old mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, is one of the most compelling true crime cases the public has ever witnessed. Stranger than fiction, with more twists and turns than a Texas road map, with all of the main players in the case all being not only guilty of horrific crimes, but also being victims themselves, and that includes the author of this book herself, Gypsy Rose Blanchard. The cryptic post made on Dee Dee Gyp Facebook page on June the 14th, 2015. "That bitch is dead," shocked those that knew the mother-daughter duo, enough to prompt them to call 911 for a well-being check to the Blanchard home. Upon arrival, and after a search warrant was obtained later that night, deputies from the Springfield Police Department located Dee Dee's decomposing body in her bed, and her 19-year-old handicapped, wheelchair-bound daughter, Gypsy, was missing. Gypsy was located the next day, June the 15th, 500 miles away in Wisconsin, at her boyfriend, Nicholas Godejohn's home. When Gypsy was seen walking into the courtroom via news channels and social media, family and friends were completely shocked, as this was the first time most of them had ever seen her walking. Then to learn that she was almost 24 years old instead of 19 years old, as they had all been told by the duo, questions started looming. They had all been told Gypsy suffered from many major medical diseases and even some terminal diseases. They had all seen the wheelchair, the feeding tube, multiple doctor visits. Dee Dee had even told them all about the many issues that Gypsy had suffered since birth. So what was going on here? Dee Dee Blanchard had been frauding everyone using Gypsy as her meal ticket, when there was absolutely nothing wrong with her at all. She had frauded hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of money and gifts. They had even frauded a home built by Habitat Humanity, free helicopter rides to medical treatments that Gypsy did not even need, and so much more. Gypsy had started going behind her mother's back in 2012, creating multiple accounts on various social media networks. When Gypsy was 19, even though she was being told she was 15 by her mother, she met a guy from Big Bend, Wisconsin named Nick Godejohn on one of the sites that she had made a profile on, a Christian dating site. Their online relationship soon took a drastic turn. The pair started doing live webcams together on role play with costumes and BDSM. Unbeknownst to Gypsy, Nicholas had a police record of indecent exposure as well as a diagnosed mental illness. Gypsy fell for Nick really hard. She wanted her mother to meet him and hoped that Dee Dee would approve of their relationship and allow her to date Nicholas and be with him without having to keep it a secret. So, she and Nick planned a chance meeting at the theater. Gypsy and her mother were going to see the movie Cinderella. Gypsy sent Nicholas the money for some new clothes to wear to the theater, as well as sent him money for bus fare to Missouri and a night's hotel stay. But the meeting did not go as planned. Dee Dee was livid when Gypsy introduced her to Nick, immediately pushing Gypsy in her wheelchair out of the theater and demanding she never speak to him again. This is when the couple started plotting ways for them to be together and how Gypsy could escape her mother's iron-fisted clutch. On June the 14th, 2015, Nick arriving back in Missouri and in a hotel room, again, all expenses paid, by Gypsy sending him the money to get there. Nicholas waited for Gypsy's text telling him that her mother was asleep. That was his cue. When he received the text, he called a taxi to bring him to Gypsy's home. He knew Gypsy had left the front door open for him. So as he opened the front door and started to enter the home, Gypsy met him at the door with gloves, telling him to put them on before he touched anything. Then she handed him the knife. She had stolen this knife from Walmart just for the reason of what was about to happen. Gypsy went into the bathroom and covered her ears with her hands, as she did not want to hear her mother's screams that she knew would be coming at any moment. Nicholas made his way into a sleeping Dee Dee's bedroom, where he brutally stabbed her 17 times, almost severing her head. Gypsy accepted a plea deal from prosecutors for second-degree murder for her role in her mother's murder. She was sentenced to serve 10 years in prison. She served 85% of her sentence and was granted parole in 2023, with a release date of December the 28th, with 2 years parole. Nicholas Godejohn was charged with first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Several documentaries and docuseries has been made about Gypsy's case, as well as news stories and podcasts, none of which she had any input into whatsoever. These were all made and recorded using case information from trial dockets, friends and family interviews, and so on. Melissa Moore decided it was time that Gypsy was able to tell her own story in her own words. She contacted Gypsy and they formed a wonderful friendship. Gypsy opened up to Melissa through phone calls and letters like she had never been able to before. Their friendship only proved stronger and stronger throughout the 5 years that they had together, and all the way until she walked out of the prison on December the 28th, 2023. Today, being a grown 32-year-old married woman, Gypsy is on her journey to start a brand new life. Melissa, along with author Michelle Matrasani, worked closely together to capture Gypsy's life in her first time ever coming out with her story of the abuse and lies she lived every day at the hands of her own mother, and how she managed to forgive her mother. Gypsy's complete memoir will be released at some point during 2024, but this ebook serves as a stepping stone into her full memoir. Introduction. The introduction is a letter to Dee Dee from Gypsy while she was in prison. This letter is very deep and personal, and I will hit on some of the highlights in the letter in my own words. But to get the full letter and the heartfelt words from Gypsy to her mother, please purchase the ebook. Gypsy tells her mother at the time she is writing this letter she is 28 years old and serving her time in prison for her role in her murder. She explains to her mother that this letter can never give her life back to her, nor would any apology she could offer her. And for the last 5 years, she has felt the pain the words in this letter brought to her, acknowledging that she has relived her crime every day, the crime that landed her where she lives today in prison. But for the most part, she's reflected on how the actions of her mother are what led her to her current situation, and how her raising was absolutely not normal, and her entire childhood isolated from everyone, with her mother being her one and only confidant and socialization. The scars that can and cannot be seen inside and out is a reminder of all the medical abuse that was forced on her that she did not need, to treat ailments and diseases that she did not have, the homeschooling that she claimed she gave Gypsy, yet never actually happened. It has left her without any education for the most part, wreaked havoc on her and her self-esteem and socialization skills, overall completely closing her off from a big world where she could have made friends and thrived as a normal child and teenager and young adult. Instead of going to the mall with friends to pick out the perfect prom dress, her mother took her to buy Halloween-type Disney princess costumes. Free will was something that she never experienced. Her every move and every word was closely monitored by her mother. And if any move or word was not in the prearranged script, Dee Dee's hand was always fast to put her back in line. She goes on to tell her mother that she has been taking this time to focus on and find herself and who she really is, and trying to process how everything even came to be the way it was and is, and why it had to end the way it did. She says that she has learned through all of this that her mother had a mental illness that made her very unstable, Munchausen by proxy. And after learning about her mother's mental condition and all the disease is made of, she forgives her mother for everything she put her through for the first 23 years of her life. She also apologizes to her mother in the letter for having a part in her death, as murder was not the answer, adding that she will always love her mother for giving her life. She thinks about her every single day, and she will always have regrets and remorse. And she knows her mother is a good woman with a bad mental illness. She continues by saying that she plans to turn her tragedies into triumphs and plans to become an advocate to help other children whose parents suffer from MBP, and by being a public speaker on how to recognize the red flags before it's too late. She closes by saying that even though she can never turn back time, and she now wants to spread awareness and turn the memories of her mother from negative to positive. She ends the letter saying that she loves her mother and signs it Gypsy, 2018, Chillicothe Correctional, Missouri. She explains this letter was written in a mandatory class called ICVC, and this class is to bring self-awareness to the consequences of your crime and how your actions impacted the victims of the crime. Adding the class was very powerful in teaching that accountability has to be taken for the crime, and how the ultimate victim was only one of the many actual victims that were affected, realizing that she was also a victim as well as Dee Dee's family, friends, neighbors, and Nick were all victims of her mother's MBP, and all of their lives were also changed forever because of that. She says before taking this class in prison that she had never considered Nick as being a victim, as he chose to violently murder her mother of his own accord. But he did lose his freedom for the rest of his life because she was the catalyst. Along with the accountability that this class taught, Gypsy says that she has cried relentlessly, had terrifying nightmares, screaming out for her mother, and also having to overcome and detox from an opioid addiction that she had when she entered prison. And even through everything and all of the memories, heartache, and pain of her youth at the hands of her mother, she says that she misses her mother terribly. After a relapse or two in prison, she is very happy to say that she is clean and sober today. She says that she is now working on finishing up her complete memoir book, which will go more in depth and will be her whole story. After the act first aired on Hulu, Gypsy said she became a public figure overnight. And whatever options people formed about her life from watching that series, she said she had absolutely nothing to do with the storyline behind it, as well as she was not contacted or even compensated in any shape, form, or fashion with what that series or any of the other various series, shows, blogs, tabloids, or podcasts that have took it upon themselves to bring her life story out to the world. Reflecting back on her past is at times very unsettling. She continues on about how putting the pieces of her 32 years of life together on paper has not been easy, and how she has used different themes of her life to put that book together. She hopes that the memoir, as well as this ebook, will help everyone to actually know her story, instead of all the misinformation and stories that have been told and shown through these various forms of mainstream media. And her story is the only story that should have ever been told. Closing the introduction chapter with Love, Gypsy, October the 2nd, 2023. Chapter 1. On Trust and Betrayal. This chapter begins with a transcript of a call from Gypsy to author Melissa Moore. Gypsy excitedly tells Melissa that she's gotten her parole answer that day and says that her earliest release date would be on December the 28th, 2023. She adds that her emotions are all over the place just thinking back on the past 7 years of the good and bad she experienced while she has been in prison, and what it's going to be like when she is released, and how surprisingly it took the parole board only 48 hours to make their decision on her early release, when it normally takes almost a month to have a return answer from them. Melissa is equally excited for Gypsy. They exchange talk, and Melissa asks her if she plans to tell anyone. Gypsy says that she will not be telling anyone except her closest family, and a couple of reasons for that is being, one, she doesn't want any heat from the other inmates saying she got out with barely any time spent for her crime, as people she is locked up with were serving much longer sentences for the same crime she had. And also because she didn't want anyone in there doing anything to mess it up for her. A photo of a younger Dee Dee and Gypsy is shown, and they are dressed the same. She says that Dee Dee dressed them the same almost all the time, and she even ordered them matching outfits online. Botched trust. Dee Dee made it a point to be basically the only person in Gypsy's life that she could talk to. During the most crucial ages of brain development, Dee Dee would never miss an opportunity to remind Gypsy that she was all that she really had, and that she always put Gypsy's interest above anything else, and was the sole reason that she was even alive, due to her many medical problems. Gypsy's many doctors were also under the impression that Dee Dee was an amazing mother, and she always made Gypsy her top priority. Gypsy says because of this very short leash that her mom kept on her, she was not able to make real friends, and she was not able to make rash decisions of who she could trust and who she couldn't. She gave a couple of examples of how if she would have had those experiences of being betrayed by someone she thought was a friend, it would have been very beneficial to her in the future, adding that even when she was having to talk and deal with her attorneys, and even her dad and stepmom, she did not know how to trust anyone. She had always been told that no one, except her mother, really cared about what happened to her at all. She was lost and confused in a big world she had never known before. The first year of her incarceration was very hard mentally for her to wrap her head around. Learning about her not having any of the medical issues her mother had always told her she had, learning it was all a lie and she had nothing wrong with her at all, accepting that the one person in this world that she had always believed and trusted had betrayed her horribly and totally robbed her of having a childhood and being a teenager. If her own mother could betray her in this extreme way, how could she ever trust anyone? Ever. She did not even trust her first appointed attorney for this very reason. While she was in the county jail and awaiting trial, she was emotionally destroyed, missing her mother, regretting what she and Nick had done, still being in love with Nick at the time. She was an emotional wreck. Another inmate started talking to her, trying to comfort her, telling her that she would always be her friend, her shoulder to cry on. Gypsy was happy to have someone that she could trust and open up to, someone that would listen to her and not judge her. So she opened up to this girl, poured her heart out to her, and she said it felt like such a huge weight had been lifted off her chest just knowing that she had someone she could talk to. The two shared their life stories with each other, and she thought she had finally found someone that she could truly trust with her deepest secrets. Then, Gypsy's attorney visited her and informed her that her friend she had opened up to had taken the things that she had told her and was using them as a bargaining chip with her own attorney to tell them these secrets in exchange for a plea deal for herself. And these things that Gypsy had told her had very little to do with Gypsy's crime anyway. Gypsy says that she realized right then and there that she had let her guard down and allowed herself to be a victim of manipulation yet again. So it is for reasons such as this that she was given her early release date from prison. She would not tell anyone at the prison, adding that some people are jealous and love to mess others up just out of spite and jealousy. Admitting for the most part that she experienced her first feelings of trust and betrayal in jail. Reflecting back on her life, it has become evident to her that betrayal was just a part of her family dynamics, like a circle of betrayal in a sense. Melissa asked Gypsy during one of their phone calls if she had a close bond with her grandparents, Dee Dee's parents. Gypsy says that her grandmother died when she was about 6 years old, and her death had devastated Dee Dee in a big way. Very soon after she died, her grandpa married a girl named Laura. She talks about her grandpa and Laura claiming that Dee Dee tried to poison Laura with Roundup weed killer. Gypsy says she thinks that it's so crazy that Dee Dee, Laura, and her stepmom, Christy, all worked together as CNAs at the same hospital and at the same time. Gypsy goes on to talk to Melissa about having no clue that her home life was abnormal. She never knew that taking baths with her mom her whole life was unusual, and until she went to jail, she always thought her and her mom's life was the same as everyone else's as far as things like that went. Like, she never knew it was considered dysfunctional for her just to hop in the bathtub with her mom, like no big deal. And she did not even think it was odd that her mother would shave her vagina while they bathed together. Gypsy says when she was 19 years old, Dee Dee told her that her dad, Gypsy's grandfather, used to molest her when she was little, and continued to molest her after Gypsy was born, and while they were living with them, while her mom was recovering from an accident she had in 2001. And she knew that it was not normal for a father to do that to their daughter. But she did clearly remember when her and her mom lived with her grandfather and Laura, and her grandfather would prepare a bath and make Gypsy and Dee Dee take a bath with him. Gypsy adds that she absolutely believes her mother about him molesting her, because he also molested Gypsy when she stayed with them while her mother was recovering from the accident. Dee Dee had suffered a serious injury in 2001 after a car wreck. She was hospitalized for 2 months after this accident. She had serious injuries to her lower leg that never healed correctly. She was left with debilitating pain that required her being permanently prescribed narcotics. And Gypsy admits that she would sneak and take her mother's pain pills, and this caused her to become addicted to opioids. She also thinks the reason Dee Dee would shave her vagina and tell her that it was making her clean stemmed from the essay that her mother endured from her father, as well as the fact that Dee Dee's mother also exhibited signs of MVP, and Dee Dee possibly felt the need to keep her own little girl neat and clean. She says she tried to understand everything that happened in her life by trying to see it from her mother's perspectives, saying that her mom was betrayed by her own father, and then Gypsy's father, when he just out of the blue told Dee Dee he wanted a divorce while she was pregnant with Gypsy. Then the one person Dee Dee had she thought would never leave or betray her did, several times. That person being Gypsy, betraying her by attempts to run away and then just pulling away from her, and then the ultimate betrayal. Gypsy had always been under the assumption that her dad cared nothing about her. He abandoned them and made a new family. These are some of the things that she says Dee Dee always told her. It wasn't until her first attorney told her the truth about her father and how he would send her gifts and cards and money every holiday and birthday, and that her father was totally shocked to learn that his 23-year-old daughter was perfectly healthy and she could walk. Gypsy was leery of the things that her attorney was telling her. She really didn't even believe him, because she thought, how does this stranger know anything about my dad? He doesn't even know me. But she learned that he had been in contact with her dad and had found out everything that Dee Dee had told everyone about Gypsy's father was just another one of her lies and attempts to garner sympathy from those that were none the wiser. Apparently, Gypsy's dad, Rod Blanchard, was having an affair with Dee Dee's co-worker, Christy, when Dee Dee was pregnant with Gypsy, and he left a pregnant Dee Dee for Christy, and when Gypsy was about 6 months old, Rod married his mistress, Christy, soon after his divorce was final from Dee Dee. Dee Dee never got over the betrayal of her co-worker and her husband. She never remarried or even dated anyone after that. Gypsy says when she learned what MVP actually was, she believes her mother was legitimately much sicker than she ever portrayed Gypsy to be. She says after thinking about everything as a whole, she finds it strange that she had been to all of these various doctors and specialists as far back as she can remember, yet she had never been to an OB/GYN because her mom was worried that procedures done by a gynecologist would take her virginity, and there was no reason to see a gynecologist anyway, since she wasn't being sexually active. Gypsy refers to her stepmother, Christy, as her mother today, saying that Christy is everything a great mother should be, and the mother that she wished she had growing up, adding that she didn't know where she would be today without Christy in her life. Melissa asked Gypsy a tough question, and she reminds her that there are people out there that think she too may be a liar and a manipulator just like her mom was. Gypsy answers and basically says she really don't care what anyone other than the ones that love her think, and her actions will prove to them all that she is not the person her mother was. She does admit that she had to teach herself how to be an honest person, adding that she has absolutely lied, betrayed, and deceived those who loved her. She has also told only parts of her story, leaving out any malicious parts that involve her to make it appear she is better than she truly is. But because she knows she has done these things only to benefit herself, this helps her to be able to recognize the pattern and break these selfish habits. She gives an example of manipulating and lying to her stepmother when she was in prison, telling her that she had broken another inmate's CD player and she needed to pay for it. So Christy sent her the requested $50 to replace the CD player. But a few years later, Gypsy admitted to Christy that she had lied to her about the $50. She made up a story that she knew would work for Christy to send her the money. And then she took the money and she bought drugs with it. Trust is a two-way street. Dee Dee taught Gypsy how to shoplift when she was rather young, and seeing as most everyone knew the pair in Springfield, Missouri, and looked at them as public figures, unsuspected public there saw them as was being the amazing single mother with the special needs little girl. So no one ever suspected one bad thing coming from them, but Dee Dee and Gypsy were pros of the game of shoplifting. Things accidentally on purpose being knocked off shelves and coincidentally landing right into Gypsy's lap as she sat innocently in her wheelchair. And all those items that fell in her lap ended up finding their way underneath her thick, poofy Cinderella dress. Also wearing a beanie shopping was key. Many items could be put into the beanie. Some of her beanies would even hold up to 15 CDs. And for the larger items that couldn't be set on in the wheelchair or slipped into the beanie, they used a method they referred to as the barcode swap, where they would peel off clearance stickers from various items in Walmart and place this clearance sticker over barcodes of much more expensive items. Then just use self-checkout. A lot of the things they shoplifted were stuff they didn't even need or even use, just random things that they would hoard. They even had an entire bedroom dedicated to just keeping things in that was hoarded. And in their bedroom, there was so much stuff that Gypsy says she had to literally clear out a pathway for her to get from the door to the bed. She says that her normal life was just secrets and lies, adding that even their home from Habitat for Humanity was a scam. The pureed food that Dee Dee made and claimed that she put into Gypsy's tube, that was nothing more than a prop. The Make-A-Wish trips were all fraudulently taken. Gypsy's medical records and birth certificates were faked. Gypsy says that part of her life is now nothing more than a surreal memory, and she is now working towards building a real, honest life that is not an act built on lies and manipulations. She wants to be an inspiration to others by being real, but she says that she still has trouble with trust. And that's an area that she keeps effing up in. Her life is no longer built around a rehearsed script. My mother is my best friend. She talks about a guy that was in his 30s she met, and she thought he could be her way out, thinking that maybe he would be the one that could save her from her mother. This guy also knew Dee Dee. They had all met at a convention. Gypsy felt very comfortable talking to this guy. She felt trust in him and opened up to him, telling him that she could walk. She told him how her mother kept her trapped in this act that they were doing. She said it felt so damn good to be able to actually tell someone and get all of the secrets between her and her mom off her chest, something she had never been able to do before. He was the first person she ever told any of the secrets to. Well, needless to say, she ran away and went to his place, where he lived with his friend. And Dee Dee showed up there and conned her to get in the car and go back home with her. She promised her that she wasn't mad or upset that Gypsy was seeing this guy, and she could continue to see him, but she needed to go home now. But when they got back home, Gypsy says that Dee Dee beat her and then literally tied her to the bedpost with a dog leash. Soon after that, she made a profile on a Christian dating site and she met Nicholas Godejohn. They started talking and she was so naive that she began trusting Nick quickly. And soon enough, she told Nick the big secret, telling him that she didn't really need a wheelchair and she could walk fine. She says he used her trust against her and he started making her do all this BDSM stuff with him online. Trusting love. Gypsy says there has been 3 men that she has been seriously involved with in her lifetime. One was Nick, and she says that he was never actually love. Even though at the time she thought it was, she had no idea what an actual relationship was like or about. And the things that Nick asked of her to engage in him with, she thought that these things must be what a normal relationship was all about. So she went along with Nick, whatever he wanted to do, adding that Nick demanded of her controlling and humiliating things. And at the time, she craved attention, and any attention she got, she mistook it as being a romantic relationship. She now knows that is not true and real love. Real love is not submissive and controlling. Gypsy says when she and Nick were caught, they both began blaming the other for what happened, adding that she felt guilty that he was going to prison because if he had never met her, he would have never done what he did, that she could not stop thinking about him having to spend the rest of his life in prison for this. But yet, she says it never, not one time, dawned on her that she was also going to go to prison and was guilty of the same thing he was guilty of, which was the murder of her mother. Gypsy and Nick were incarcerated at the same facility for a year while awaiting trial. She said that they would leave each other little secret love cues at the jail. Things like leaving love letters to each other in the rec room, even writing NGP loves GRB on the walls. She said in the first letter that she wrote him, she did apologize to him while they were in jail. After Gypsy was sentenced, they stopped communicating. But in 2019, Gypsy received a letter from Nick. At the time, she was engaged to a guy named Ken. Nick had heard about the engagement and he was pissed off. In the letter, Nick told Gypsy that she was committing adultery, saying that because he had taken her virginity, they were married in God's eye. Gypsy says that Nick is not the person that took her virginity. Gypsy decided to write him one last Dear John letter. She explained to him that she had moved on from him and had no desire of ever reconciling a relationship with him. She said that she covered everything she could think of in her final letter to him, from the time they met, their arrest and crime, and how they were both adults with child minds when they met and done what they did. She let him know she felt guilty about these things because she knows he did not have much experience at all with the real world when they were talking and meeting, adding that's why she testified at his trial in his defense, and she took full accountability for her role in her mother's murder. She went on to tell him that she did not testify in his defense out of love for him. She done it because she felt obligated to admit to her part. Chapter 2. On Family and Friendship. This chapter starts with Melissa asking Gypsy via prison phone call if she ever hears from her mother's side of the family, the Patrice. Gypsy says a couple of her aunts and cousins, with her being the one that reaches out to them via phone calls. In the book, the aunts and cousins are named as well. I will not be using their names here. With one of her male cousins being very supportive of her even though he does not approve of what she did. He also understands why she did it. He even went as far as saying he wanted to be present at her parole hearing to support her, which Gypsy says would look very good to the parole board, seeing as he is part of the family of the murder victim, Dee Dee being his aunt. This cousin was the only one on her mother's side that came out publicly in support of Gypsy. The others basically did not want to be involved and remained silent and neutral about the crime. She shares a couple of more family photos in the book, one of a very young Dee Dee and Rod when they first met, as well as a wedding photo. Both very attractive people. Dee Dee was very beautiful in these photos. She explains under the photos that her parents met at a bar that was in a bowling alley where they lived, adding that she later learned that her mother really fell hard for her dad, but his feelings for Dee Dee were not mutual. The pair got married in December of 1990 when Dee Dee was 2 months pregnant with Gypsy. A couple of more photos were added, one being Gypsy, where she looks to be around 3 or 4 years old with her mom and dad. Now, what I find a bit odd about this photo personally is the way Dee Dee and Rod look like a loving couple with Gypsy in Dee Dee's lap smiling. Rod has his head leaned towards Dee Dee, almost resting it on her shoulder, and Dee Dee has her arm around Rod with her fingers rubbing his ear. Both parents are all smiles, and it appears they're halfway laying down on a sofa or in a chair. Gypsy explains under the photo that her stepmother, Christy, is the one that took this photo. She goes on to say that Christy was always gracious in sharing her dad, so Gypsy and Rod could have great memories to look back on. But the thing is, Christy and Rod got married when Gypsy was 6 months old. Maybe it's just me, but I find this photo a bit awkward with the way Dee Dee and Rod look like any other happily married couple with their baby girl, knowing that Rod's wife, Christy, who used to be Dee Dee's friend, took the photo. Another photo shows Gypsy as a toddler on some sort of ride-on toy, and Rod's kneeled down with his head on her little shoulder. They're both smiling. Gypsy says she doesn't have any memory of when or where this photo was taken or even who took it, adding that the few visits that she did have with her dad always felt awkward, and she always felt nervous when they took place because Dee Dee always told her before the visits that she should never question her dad about leaving her and Dee Dee and making himself a new family. Gypsy goes into a bit of family background, saying Dee Dee came from a rather large family, with her being the youngest of 6 brothers and sisters. When Dee Dee and Rod met, He was 17 and Dee Dee was 24. Dee Dee was a former beauty queen, and her parents got married because Dee Dee was pregnant. Gypsy refers to it as her dad knocking her mom up. She says later she learned that her dad was never in love with her mother. Gypsy says because of this crushing heartbreak by Rod, Dee Dee had a resentment towards all men and always told her that men may be nice to look at, but they will betray you, so it's best just to stay away from them all. And that's exactly the rule of life that Dee Dee followed until the end of her life, after Rod crushed her heart. Gypsy always says that she suspects that her grandmother, Dee Dee's mother, may have also had MBP, and it's possible her mother had it through learned behavior, so to speak, saying that Dee Dee told her that when she was little, she missed a lot of days of school because her mom always thought she was sick, and she would take her to many doctors as well. Gypsy says that her mother did have severe diabetes and had to take insulin. She says she remembers being a daisy in Girl Scouts, and Dee Dee volunteered with her Girl Scout troops. But she was never able to be promoted any higher than Daisy because they moved around so much and had to start all over with new troops, so she always remained on Daisy level in Girl Scouts. She talks about what a typical, normal day was like for her and her mother at home, saying they would get up around 11 a.m. Dee Dee would make herself a can of frozen biscuits, and while the biscuits was cooking, she would mix up Gypsy's meds and Pediasure. While Dee Dee was administering Gypsy's meds in her feeding tube, she would eat her biscuits. Then they would watch Bold and the Beautiful, and if they didn't have anywhere to go, they would lounge around in their pajamas all day, watch movies. Dee Dee was a vegetarian, so for her dinner, she would make something like sweet peas over rice. Their nightly routines: Dee Dee bathing Gypsy, dressing her, and putting her in bed. Even though she says that she had her own whole room, she only ever remembers sleeping on the left side of her mother in her bed. She would put Gypsy's breathing machine on her, which she says never helped her to breathe better anyway. Gypsy says when she was 18, a charity gifted her with an HP laptop for Christmas. The charity thought she was 13 years old. And while Dee Dee was asleep one night, she used her laptop making searches about what the outside world was really like, searching things like what teenagers did for fun, what a school classroom looked like, how teenagers talked, teenage relationships, even how to kiss. She says her hormones were becoming very active and her curiosity about boys heightened in a huge way. She knew if her mother had any inkling whatsoever that she was curious about boys or relationships, she would be livid. So she had to keep her feelings to herself, and it would be hell of one sort or the other if her mother ever found out what she was looking at and searching on her laptop. She would be punished in some form or fashion, physical, verbal, emotional, and even by means of casting spells, curses, or hexes. She gives an example of one time as a punishment. Her mother bought a raw cow's tongue. She cooked the tongue, not to eat it, as she did not eat meat. She bought it to cast a spell, a curse, on Gypsy. The spell was to cast the sinful thoughts from Gypsy's mind, as well as place a curse on her that she would never find love and never be free. She also warned Gypsy that she was a witch. Gypsy said the spell and curse that she cast with the cow's tongue made her think that maybe her mom had watched Snow White way too many times, adding that if she ever asked her mother why she couldn't have friends her own age, her mother was fast to remind her of her Wiccan powers, claiming that little things that happen around the house was her using her mind and powers to make them happen. Things such as water dripping from the shower head. Dee would tell Gypsy that she was controlling the drip with her energy and her mind. even telling her that the house would literally swallow her whole if she just willed it to happen. Dee Dee would say things to keep Gypsy terrified of not being right by her side. An example used is if she ever wanted to just sleep in her own bedroom one night, Dee Dee would put her in the bed and then look very worried and say, "I hope nothing happens to you tonight," before she walked out and closed the door. This would make Gypsy terrified of being anywhere without her mother's protection always by her side. When the light went out and the door shut, Gypsy would scream out to her mother to come and get her as she became terrified of the dark. When Dee Dee would come to get her, she would cuddle her in her arms and tell her, "You are my heart." Melissa asked Gypsy about going to school and asked her if she ever wanted to go with the other kids and if she ever asked her mom why she couldn't go to school also. Gypsy explains that when she was somewhere between 4 and 6 years old, her mom started homeschooling her using the ACE curriculum, adding that it was just basic kindergarten first grade work, saying that Dee Dee was never certified through any school district, nor did she have any kind of credentials to teach homeschool. So she just eventually stopped teaching her. Even when the doctors would ask Dee Dee what school she went to, Dee Dee would just tell them that she's homeschooled, and they never said anything else about it. So Gypsy says that she only had a first grade education when she went to prison. Melissa asked her about having friends in prison as well as any friends. Gypsy said she did have a few friends when she was a kid. She made a friend when she was in Girl Scouts, as well as a close friend she met and remained friends with for what seemed like a while. They met when Gypsy was a part of a club for disabled children. She says when her friend got older and started liking boys, Dee Dee then forbid her from being friends with her. Gypsy says when she went to prison, she had no clue what actual friends and friendships really was. The only thing that she really knew about having a friend or being a friend is what she had seen on the Disney Channel from actresses like Miley Cyrus and Selena Gomez. With that being said, she ended up being put into segregation in prison for trusting people she thought were her friends. She talks about 2 women she met in prison that did indeed become good friends of hers, and they did not become her friend just because she was infamous either. She bonded very closely with one of these 2 friends because their crimes were very similar. Her boyfriend had also murdered her mother. Gypsy explains every year that Mother's Day came around, it was always a hard day for her and her friend. So one year, when her friend was having a really hard time with it being Mother's Day, Gypsy surprised her by making her a prison cake, and she wrote on the cake, "Happy Mommy Issues Day." She says while she was in prison, she would see photos of her half-sister going to prom and graduation, and even though her sister was 10 years younger than Gypsy, Gypsy would slip into a dark place, seeing her half-sister and brother living while she sat in the same situation day after day, never being able to grow up or live her life. Her life consisted of being in prison with no teeth or even having a basic education. While her sister was doing her makeup so pretty for her special occasions, Gypsy said her special occasion consisted of putting in her dentures. She explains the reason her real teeth had to be extracted was because her mother had put numbing agents on her gums and convinced a doctor that she drilled too much, and she had to have her salivary glands removed. Due to this surgery and the decaying teeth, some of her teeth just fell out, and a few others decayed to the point of having to be extracted. Also, some of the medications she took caused dental decay as well. Gypsy says that she has a hard time putting the past behind her and the things her mother told her about her father, and the way she would always tell her how good her dad was to his other kids and how he had abandoned her. She says that Dee Dee moved them so far away from her dad after Katrina, and that was one of Dee Dee's ways to play on her dad's sympathy, saying sympathy pays dividends, and sympathy could create celebrity. In the closing of this chapter, Gypsy says that even though it shows in the movie The Act about her mother blending food and feeding it to her through the feeding tube, that is not true. She says her mother never blended food and put it into her feeding tube. It never happened. Her feeding tube was only ever used strictly for water, nutritional supplements, and medications. Also, her friend in prison was only 16 years old when she was arrested for talking her boyfriend into shooting both of her parents as they slept in 2005. Her father survived, but her mother did not. Her friend is serving 2 life sentences for her crime of second-degree murder and first-degree assault. Gypsy adds that this woman is a great friend of hers, and they shared their background stories with each other as they both suffered through very similar childhoods as well as their crimes. Chapter 3. On God and Faith. Gypsy says she is Catholic and went to Sunday Mass every Sunday with her mom's parents when they lived in Louisiana. But when they moved to Missouri, her mother changed her religion to non-denominational and told everyone that Gypsy would be a nun when she grew up. A photo is shown of Dee Dee holding an infant Gypsy as she is being christened by a priest. Gypsy said she used to think that being a nun when she grew up would be something that she would love to be, seeing as how her mom told her that a nun's position in life was to help people, and since she did love helping people and animals, it sounded like something that she would enjoy doing. The older she got, and the more she learned about being a nun, she realized that was not something she wanted to be. Nuns can't get married or date or do teenager things, especially the part about boys. Did not sound appealing to her at all anymore. She goes on to say that her mom bounced around different churches and denominations in Louisiana as well as Missouri, adding that she had been baptized 7 times. 5 of those times were before her crime, and once was in the county jail and once at the prison. She explains that after each baptism she felt clean, and then anytime she felt bad about something, like telling lies or back-talking her mom, she wanted to be baptized to feel clean again. Gypsy says her mother was schizophrenic and heard voices in her head at times, and would tell Gypsy that she had 8 voices talking to her and that 7 of them did not like her. She says she was taught to live a life of deception and lies, which made her feel dirty. So when she would go to church on Sunday, she would pray that God would take away all the ickiness she felt. She would pray every night before she went to sleep that God would take all the tormenting hell and make it just stop. But she never received an answered prayer or a blessing. She was mad at God, and eventually she just stopped believing or having faith in anything or anyone, and by the time the murder happened, she had just stopped believing or having faith in anything or anyone, and she says that is what caused her to open blind faith up to Nick. When she was first arrested, she said she prayed to God for the first time in a very long time, begging Him to help her, telling Him how scared she was and apologizing, and begging Him to send her a blessing. She does believe that the plea deal that she was given was her answered prayer and her blessing from God, and God was forgiving her as well as giving her a second chance. Maybe I will become a witch. A photo is shown with Gypsy in her brown prison-assigned outfit wearing a pentagram necklace. She says during the pandemic, her friend in prison mentioned earlier became her new roommate. and this friend is a practicing Wiccan. Gypsy says the religion interested her because with her heritage and being from Louisiana, it was very familiar territory for her anyway, and she asked her friend to tell her about the Wiccan religion. Gypsy talks about a dream she had last year. She was on her bunk, laying on her back, sleeping, when she felt something on her chest. In the dream, she woke up to see a dark figure over her. This figure had ripped her chest open and was eating her heart. She woke up terrified. When she closed her eyes, she could clearly see the demon was in her head, even though she was awake. But when she opened her eyes, it was gone. She says prayer helps her to have a sense of peace all around her, so she does not believe that reading tarot or casting love spells could ever give her the same calmness and peace that prayer does. So she is back to being a Christian today. She explains her outlook on trust and faith, saying that she has to have trust in someone before she will have faith in them. She gives an example with her stepmother, Christy, saying that she has faith that Christy will be the best mother to her that she can be, and will treat her the same as she does her own children, adding that Christy has already proved to her all of this through her actions that she will be the mother she has always wanted and needed. She goes on to explain why she puts actions above words now. She talks about coming from a life of knowing nothing but lies and deception, but now she is trying hard to be truthful and transparent and open book to her truths. One of the first things she wants to do when she is released is to give back to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, as she feels so bad about the conning that was done to them from her mother. She says there are other organizations as well, but that one is the one she feels the worst about. Melissa asks Gypsy if she has forgiven herself for what she's done. Gypsy says that not everyone has forgiven her for her mother's fraud, adding that even though they may not hate her for it, they also do not want to be any part of her life. She gives her aunts as an example, saying that she talks to them once a year, and they always remind her by saying something like, "You know you could have told us," instead of reaching out to men on Facebook. Which Gypsy says it makes her feel like shit when they say this to her, and all she can do is apologize to them. She knows that people are shaped by the things that happen to them, so now she has forgiven her mother and wonders if her past may be why she was the person that she became. Chapter 4. On Becoming a Public Figure. Gypsy refers to her mother before she was born as Beauty Queen Dee Dee, adding that she really wanted to know her mother, so she reached out to people from Dee Dee's past. A former best friend of her mother's from high school told her that Dee Dee always wanted to be famous and marry a movie star when she grew up. She was also a sort of groupie for the popular hair bands of rock music. Dee Dee loved being in the spotlight. Gypsy says the mental illness of MVP only added to Dee Dee's backstage show, and Gypsy says that she was never the star of her mother's shows, and when the camera started rolling, it was Dee Dee that took the spotlight and done all the talking. She says her mom would give her cues to when it was her time to talk, and she already had the lines memorized as to what she was supposed to say. She had certain lines such as, "My mom is my best friend and this is my dream come true." After the act aired, she became a public figure almost instantaneously. Gypsy says that she was not happy at all how that series ripped her out of her very private life into being a public figure so big even her mom couldn't have imagined using her most wicked spell to be so big. Before the act, there were various episodes about Gypsy's life, from HBO's Mommy Dead and Dearest all the way to podcasts and sleazy clickbait videos. But none of those had the extreme impact as the act did on people. She started receiving emails and letters in prison. Inmates and correction officers looked at her differently, and inmates even assumed she was rich because the movie was made about her. So they started asking her for money and for her autograph. Gypsy says she had nothing to do with that series, and she had no say in it, nor did she talk to anyone involved in the filming or making of the series, adding that she has never seen the act. And again, she adds that she was not consulted or compensated in any way for the series that made Joy King a household name. Gypsy said she saw Joy King on the red carpet in all glitz and glamour while she was in a prison cell eating disgusting prison food, and the only thing she could think of was, this girl tried to play me and I had no control over it. During a call, Melissa tells Gypsy that there was a dramatized movie that was made about her dad also, and they called it The Happy Face Killer, and how David Arquette played her dad, which was a hell of a coincidence, seeing as how David's sister, Patricia, played Gypsy's mother in the act. Gypsy said she first learned there was going to be a series made about her life from her stepmom, Christy, and she was upset because she could not figure out how anyone would ever be able to play her without even talking to her one-on-one and knowing how much fear she lived in daily. She went from just being Gypsy Rose Blanchard to a celebrity overnight, but it was a celebrity for doing something awful. Gypsy said she cried to her stepmother because an inmate ran up to her asking her for her autograph, and also how she was receiving all these emails from strangers telling her how much they supported her, and adding that this confused the hell out of her as to how people wanted to support her because she was ashamed of her crime. She says every time she's asked for her autograph, she remembers that she's a murderer. She's no high horse. Someone has made a social media post saying, "She doesn't belong in prison. I wished I could bust her out." And that post was reported to the prison, which caused Gypsy to be put in the hole for 2 traumatizing weeks, while guards searched over everything she owned and read every letter she had to make sure that she was not trying to plan an escape. She continued to get mostly nice letters from strangers, but she did also occasionally get hate mail, saying that she's been called the M word many times and even told that she was worse than Nick. People saying, "Nick only had the murder weapon because of you. You put the knife in his hand, you're worse than him." She added that her family even received letters. Strange women would write to her dad, who is a happily married man, for F's sakes, going on to say that she and her family actually connected with some of these people that ended up only selling them out, using them, and once again they were betrayed. Gypsy sees the series The Act as an intrusion into her private life. She then goes into talking about how Ken wrote her after he watched Mommy Dead and Dearest. So she wrote him back thinking that he seemed like he was pretty cool. Then they started talking on the phone. They had a lot in common. When he first visited her in prison, within minutes he gave her a kiss, and that confirmed to her how he felt. So they immediately started making out right there in the visitation room. That caused Ken to get kicked out, and she says she got very lucky not being thrown in the hole because the golden rule during visitation is no touching. But she goes on to add, it would have been worth it, even if she had. When the act aired and she became an invisible celebrity, it was hard on Ken. Tabloids and clickbait were announcing their engagement. Ken, being a very private person, did not like the spotlight, so he ended their relationship. Gypsy says that was her first real heartbreak, and it was hard as hell. She talks about how her first heartbreak wasn't being surrounded by her girlfriends in her bedroom while eating Ben & Jerry's ice cream like the movies portray. She had to deal with it in a jail cell. And at that time, she missed her mother because she felt like that was one time that should have been shared between the two of them. In October of 2022, which was around 4 months after marrying her husband, she was thinking about the responsibility that came with being a wife, and she freaked the F out, adding that she had been picking fights with Ryan, and on a level she was pushing him away. So she wrote some friends to tell them that she was contemplating annulling her marriage to Ryan. She secretly hoped that her friends would talk her off of this ledge and pep talk her into not feeling the way she was. The very next day, Ryan showed up for a visit with her to try to sort all these things out. He had driven all the way from Louisiana to Missouri. While she was getting prepared for her visit, the guard asked her why she was getting an annulment, and that stunned Gypsy. She asked him how he even knew that, and he told her that he had read it in the tabloids online. She still doesn't know which of her friends that she told this to, and wrote in the letter, took a picture of her letter, and gave it to the tabloid, but she has a really good feeling which one it was. Praying for a purpose. Gypsy said she had prayed for a purpose, and she never had dreams of being an American Idol contestant or a rich actress. She never wanted to be president or land a huge feature role like Joy King did with her. She just never had dreams of being famous. As a child, her only dream was to have a normal life, and now things seem to be going in the opposite direction of her dream. She says that she is going to take the blessing that God sent her, though, with the new docuseries and the book deal and interviews, and use them as her stepping stones into a career of being an advocate, spreading knowledge and awareness about MVP. Gypsy says she doesn't want to be the victim and the perpetrator both anymore. She wants to be the influencer and maybe even have some laws passed someday. For starters, making doctors accountable for their parts in MVP, adding that her medical history was not just a red flag to doctors, it was a GD red banner that said, "How did you not know?" Chapter 5. On Self-Worth and Identity. Gypsy reflects back on some of the things her mother used to say to her. "There is 8 personalities in my head, and 7 of them don't like you. This is your fault, Gypsy. I do everything for you, sacrifice everything, and this is how you repay me?" Everything was always her fault, according to her mother, even her dad leaving, adding that Dee Dee built a wall between her and her mother's family, and that's mainly why she never called on them for help. Several mini photos are shown of multiple certificates that she owned in prison from various 12-week classes that she took. Gypsy says that according to the DOC, she did not qualify for therapy in prison because she was too well. She thinks this seems very ironic for a person that was told her entire life that she was sick. She adds that even though she did not have therapy in prison because of that, she did read books, and she learned what definitely affected her. She names a few that she must have self-diagnosed herself as having: PTSD, codependency, insecurity, abandonment, personality disorders, addiction, and trust issues, and more. She says that the codependency course that she took really coincided with her, as she learned the first attachment is with the mother, and her attachment to her mother was built of insecurity. So she did everything she could to please her mother, hoping that she could impress some of her mother's other personalities into liking her. She lived her life to earn her mother's love. Gypsy said that Dee Dee used her love for her as rewards as well as punishment, giving examples of how her mom would make her sleep in her room in the dark because she knew that she was afraid of the dark. She would smash her things with a hammer as punishment. She would cry and say she was sorry and beg her mother to just love her. Dee Dee would baby talk the cat, kissing it while ignoring Gypsy, loving on it, talking to it, saying bad things about Gypsy as if Gypsy wasn't even in the room. Then she would look at Gypsy and snarl and go right back to loving on the cat. Gypsy says this truly hurt her. She says that when she made her profiles online, it was the first time she could be a real person. She would dress and take photos of herself thinking it was how a normal person would dress and act. One photo she describes is of her wearing a brown wig, wearing a prom dress that Dee Dee had bought her on clearance after prom season ended, and she was laying across a couch with a rose. She said she felt beautiful. Gypsy said she loved having breasts, but that came to an immediate halt when a guy named Nick sent her a wink, adding that her profile bio must have grabbed his attention. She said that she had written in her bio that she was a bubbly, happy girl that was interested in sci-fi and fantasy, and that she was a virgin and saving herself for her husband. And she assumes that Nick wanted this butterfly as his girlfriend. And honestly, that built her ego up, as that was the first time anyone had ever wanted to be her boyfriend. But she says she does acknowledge that she was some tasty bait for a malignant narcissist. She added that she made the videos for him that he directed, saying that when Nick would tell her, "Good job," after sucking a dildo, the more she believed that he loved her. She always had to remember to call him master and to be a very dirty girl for him in the videos, or he would threaten to take his love from her. In a phone call with Melissa, she wants to share something that's always pissed her off, and Melissa tells her to go ahead and share it. She tells her it is some people that she's locked up with that tells her she don't even know who she really is, going on to say that she knows her self-worth and identity were formed under her mother's thumb, saying that she doesn't even know if she likes Mexican food because she's never had it. She admits that she did have to keep her real self hidden for so long, but she does know who she is. Gypsy says she believes that people can change with age, adding that she is not the same person she was 12 years ago, not even close. Adding that parts of you never change though, like she still loves animals and making silly little voices with exotic accents when there is no I in identity. Gypsy talks about her job in prison, being a janitor and mopping the floors before and after lunch break, dusting and picking up in the visitor room, and she also talks about her random job duties outside, like picking up cigarette butts, adding that the prison yard felt like her playground. When she went to prison, she didn't even know what size clothes she wore because she was always dressing in a costume or boy clothes. The only time she had ever worn a pair of jeans was the night that her and Nick left her house after the murder, and those jeans had been given to her. She remembers that they felt scratchy. She explains to Melissa that prison is like a grown-up high school, and when she first got there, she joined up with the mean girls at the prison. She had a nickname. They called her Jersey because she acted like her shit didn't stink. Melissa was a bit taken back by Gypsy saying that she was one of the mean girls. Gypsy giggled and said, yeah, she was. And she also made fun of other people and threw jabs at things with other inmates and what they did. She then went on to say that she didn't feel right being a mean girl because she's not really a mean girl. She went from being a mean girl to a goth, wearing black lipstick and listening to heavy metal music for a little while too. She goes on to say that she also experimented with her sexuality, thinking that she was pretty sure she was straight, but she really just wanted to make sure, adding that because of her essay as a child and the way her mother made her feel dirty about her body, she had built up a mental block and could never get full satisfaction, which made her think that with women she may be able to reach full climax, adding that when she was 16, she wondered to herself if she was gay after watching Xena, the Warrior Princess, because Xena and Gabrielle in the movie were lesbians, adding that the prison saying is, gay for the stay, straight for the gate. So she went with it, kissed a few girls, and was a pillow princess 4 times. In order to bloom, the old part of yourself has to wither away. Gypsy says Nick was the most toxic example of an online sexual predator, but there were others that knew her insecurities and exploited her. Her mother made her feel ashamed of her body and told her her breasts were sinful. As Gypsy said when she was 20, the only thing that made her feel good about herself was when she took her clothes off on webcam for perverts, adding that she wore her wig and had her dentures in, and she had very pretty boobs also. She would hide her feeding tube port and show off her naked body to men online, and they would tell her how beautiful she was, which made her feel good and encourage her to continue doing it. She would also numb herself with her mom's prescription medications. Gypsy says that she does not judge anyone because she has done some of the most horrible, sinful, and harmful things imaginable. So who is she to judge anyone? Adding, because of the things that she has done and experienced, this will be good for her future in advocating, as she understands so many things, and especially for young people who may be doing the same things that she was doing online. She explains to never turn to the internet for acceptance or compliments for your self-worth. She learned that the hard way. Gypsy says that she plans to have therapy when she is released to help her continue to grow, as she can already see triggers that affect her behavior towards Ryan, explaining that once he told her, "You're my heart," and she lost it and cussed him out. Ryan was totally clueless that Dee Dee had said those very words to her constantly. Gypsy acknowledges that the things her mother did and said, along with the way she was brought up, will always have an effect on her decisions and behaviors moving forward. But she doesn't want it to, and she plans to work very hard on that. She says one of the things her mother said to her, which will always be the doozy, was, "Gypsy shall never find happiness. She shall never be free." Chapter 6. On Love and Freedom. This chapter starts with showing a written letter from Gypsy to Ryan, signed with a lipstick kiss. She explains this is one of the few love letters that she wrote to Ryan, adding that she has always been a hopeless romantic. Gypsy says when she went to prison, it was the freest that she had ever been in her life. No one was holding her hand, telling her what to say or when to smile. Her mother's rules were always 1. Stay quiet. 2. Don't act too happy. Sick people don't have much energy. 3. Do not talk when adults are talking. And 4. Don't eat. Not having to abide by those 4 golden rules made her feel free. She goes into talking about her daily routine in prison, from being woken up at 7:30 a.m. for head count. Then she goes back to sleep because she don't like getting up early. Gypsy says most people think prison is like spending hard times. Shows and series like 60 Days In. But that's not the case at all at the prison that she was at. She had her own TV, drank coffee, etc., etc. She explained where she was in prison was more like a dorm room. She would go to her locker and choose something that she had bought from the commissary to make herself to eat. She enjoys working out on the elliptical in the rec room after she has her lunch. She goes back to her housing unit and takes a shower. She then works her job, sweeping, mopping, etc. for about an hour and a half. Then she has to do head count again at 4:30, and then she'll call Ryan and have him check all of her social media accounts and tell him what to write on each one. This takes a couple of hours. Then she'll chill out for an hour or so, and she'll call Ryan back for him to tell her if people acknowledged her post, liked them, and how many likes and shares that she had on them. Sometimes they'll watch a movie together that she has on her tablet after he updates her about the daily post. He puts the same movie on his tablet that she has on hers, and they watch it together at the same time. Saturdays is usually their date night when they watch their movies together. She adds that it is expensive when they watch movies together, because it costs 5 cents a minute being on the phone together, but she likes to react to movies with him in real time. 10 p.m., another head count, and then bedtime. She'll go to her room and watch her TV for a little bit, and then she'll go to sleep. Melissa reminds her that this will be the last chapter of her ebook, and Gypsy is excited because it is the ending, but also it is the beginning. She adds that Ryan has been reading the book to her chapter by chapter about things that doesn't even include him, but she keeps telling him just to be patient. His time will come. Gypsy says the freedom that she felt when first going to prison is not the freedom that she craves today. Her now grown-up idea of freedom is being able to be herself and not have to accept the demands of others just to feel loved and seen. For example, her mom wanted a forever child, and Nick wanted a love slave to control and conquer, and Ken expected her to be his Barbie. She's none of the above. She says that she's a quirky brunette with an electric personality, adding that she even wears a mask when she does interviews, like the Dateline and Dr. Phil ones. She portrays a brave person in the interviews, but inside she's very vulnerable. But she doesn't want the world to see her that way, adding that she's even contemplated taking her own life many nights in prison. She admits that her traumatic childhood with her mother is nowhere near as painful as the guilt that she carries about the murder of her mother. These are the themes of my life: trust and betrayal, family and friends, faith in God, becoming a public figure, self-worth, and identity. When the world was going batshit crazy during the pandemic, and after suffering many heartaches and betrayals, Gypsy says she received a letter. She explains that Ryan wrote her that first letter on a dare. Like Ken, Ryan had watched her documentary on HBO, and much later, she received the letter. It was during the pandemic lockdown when Ryan and his friend were just watching things on TV to cure their boredom of being in lockdown. His friend suggested that they write to some of these people in these documentaries that they were watching just to see if any of them would write back. And his friend said that she was going to write the Tiger King, and Ryan said he would write Gypsy Rose from that HBO documentary, and he did, and she wrote back. He made her laugh. He is also from Louisiana, and she says he has that deep, sexy Southern accent. She eventually let her guard down, and she allowed Ryan into her life, trusting him. She then talks about a letter that she wrote to Ryan, saying how she really wanted this letter to him to be a surprise to him, when the book was released. But seeing as he has been reading the manuscript to her already, so she would be able to approve and make changes to it, she decided that he would be surprised when he read it before it was released, because she wanted it included in the book. She begins her letter with, "Dear Ryan." She's telling him how he came into her life during a rough patch. Now, on a side note, I want you to remember, I will not read this letter or any of this book word for word in this synopsis. I will only use my own words describing what the letter is about. To read the actual letter and see the photos included in this book, as well as read the exact transcripts from the phone calls with Melissa, you will need to purchase the book. Okay. Gypsy explains to Ryan how his sexy accent was enough to make her feel special. Both being from the same state and having many things in common helped their relationship to grow, reminding him after 2 years of conversing, they finally made commitments of each other. He has proved her mother wrong about all men being out to hurt women. She praises him for being an amazing husband who has always been there for her, and how he does so much for her without ever complaining, because she's really not that easy to deal with. He has remained faithful and holds her as no other man ever has before. Her past SA still causes her issues with being comfortable mentally and physically, which holds her back from being able to have sexual pleasures. She believes that he's going to be the man that makes love to her passionately and gently, taking his time with her, something that she has never had before. Her entire lifetime, she was only in love with being in love, and now she believes she can have the family that she's always longed for, something that had been robbed from her. He is her Southern Prince Charming in their love story. A wedding photo is shown. Gypsy says their wedding was July the 21st, 2022. She had one friend attend as her inmate guest. This friend had been with her through thick and thin while she was in prison, as well as she was there for Gypsy during her and Ryan's short breakup. Then it goes on with her and Melissa on a call on Halloween. Gypsy says when she gets out, she will for sure dress up on Halloween because she still loves dressing up. And she talks about when she first got there, she used to put a sheet on her head and she wore it as a toga, acting out the ancient Greece thing. Adding that next year her and Ryan will dress up, and she really wants them to dress up as Beauty and the Beast. Gypsy says that she and Ryan do want to have children, and they don't want to prolong it too long because she is already 32 years old. But to begin with, they want to spend their own time together, and they want to have a real wedding and go to Hawaii for their honeymoon. She goes into talking about her plans when she gets out. She wants to have a nose job, exercise, and eat healthy. She says with her and Ryan having a lot of commons, like needing white noise to sleep and balancing each other out, because he is an amazing cook and she hates to cook, but she admits that she will have some adjusting to do because she's never lived in the same house with a man. It was always only her and her mom, always girly things surrounding them, so she's going to have to adjust to things. Gypsy says that she is a highly emotional person, while Ryan is a calm person. They are yin and yang. She's spontaneous, and he sits back and thinks everything through before he makes a move. She says that she's sassy, and her words can bite, and she plans to work with a therapist on that so it doesn't affect Ryan too much. The only issue Gypsy foresees is that they will need patience and therapy when she gets out because of so much that's going to be going on because she's a public figure. Ryan will also be a public figure now because of Gypsy, going from an unknown person to someone everyone recognizes. Ryan had even asked her, what if she decides that she wants to start going out to bars and drinking and things that she never got to experience before? or maybe even hooking up with other guys. Gypsy assures him that doesn't even sound appealing to her. She has no desire to hook up with strangers that doesn't even know her. She's never drank alcohol, so she doesn't even know if she would like it. She would never cheat, as that is not who she is. She worries that strangers may start writing to Ryan like they did her dad, and she worries if that happens, it may kick in her insecurities, and that is not anything she wants for them. That she wants what her mother never had, stability and a loving family. She wants happy, healthy children, friends that she can count on, as well as know that they can count on her to be a successful advocate and help helpless children. She wants to give back to the people and organizations that were hurt by her and her mother, and she wants God to bless her and Ryan, and to take care of her mother who is in heaven, and to forgive her for what she did to her mother. She wants to give her mother's life meaning and learn to live her own life in a way that her own mother never knew how. She wants happily ever after. This book has ended. Stay tuned for the next book. Signed, Gypsy. Acknowledgements. Here she gives special thanks to her husband, Ryan, to the mother she never had, her stepmother, Christy Blanchard, to her father, Rod Blanchard, to Ben Bella Books for giving her a voice and not backing away from her high-profile case, and finally to Melissa Moore and Michelle Matrasani. She gives each one a special message and thank you for the things that they have done for her and what they mean to her in each of the acknowledgements. Then the final section is titled About the Authors, beginning with Gypsy Rhodes Blanchard's bio, saying that Gypsy is an advocate, author, and speaker. She spent 8.5 years in prison, and how her story has raised awareness to millions around the world about the mental illness of MVP. It then goes into what MVP is and how Gypsy's abuse is one of the most significant stories known to the public, and how Gypsy endured much medical and emotional abuse from this disease at the hands of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, and she hopes to help other children that are experiencing the abuse that is brought on by MVP, and to provide knowledge to the medical establishments of the deception that a person with MVP is capable of. Gypsy can be followed on X, TikTok, and Instagram. Melissa Moore. Melissa is an Emmy-nominated executive producer and investigative journalist. She is on many true crime TV shows as well as podcasts, an advocate for families of victims and perpetrators, and she's also an author and co-author. Her father is Keith Jefferson, who was the infamous Happy Face Killer, who murdered 8 women in the early 90s. Melissa was also a true crime correspondent on the Dr. Oz show from 2016 to 2019. She created and hosted the series Monster in My Family on Lifetime, which ran from 2015 to 2017. She has a long list of TV and podcasts she is or has been a part of over the years included in her bio, as well as books that she has authored and co-authored. Michelle Matrasani, a publishing professional, New York Times best-selling editor, and former editorial director of HCI Books, the original publisher of Chicken Soup for the Soul and the blockbuster memoir of parental abuse, A Child Called It, as well as a list of other awards, accomplishments, and co-authored books. This book on Apple Books was 197 pages. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you think about this case in the comments below. Please consider subscribing to the channel, and we would truly appreciate a like, as it really does help our channel grow. Share the video, and until next time, This is Unjustified.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through eyes covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.